All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to season 4 of Black.Queer.Alive. I am Mimi Tempestt, and I am here with Apollo. Is it Rydzik?
Yeah,
Rydzik.
Rydzik. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I got that right. Usually I look up people's names. But hi, Apollo. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm all right. Has your semester or quarter started yet?
It starts on Monday, but I have an assignment due Sunday morning, so it kind of feels like the quarter's already started.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I started this week and I was like, okay, I'm here, but I'm like not here. I'm just whatever, make it work. Um, Tell me, you're a PhD. You and I are both PhD students, so I was very excited when I saw your response. I don't know what year are you in your program, and what program are you in?
So I'm a first year and I'm doing a sociology PhD.
Cool. I'm a first year lit, creative critical. That's what they call my track. Yeah. What's your experience so far?
It's been a lot of things. So for me, I ended up staying at my undergrad alma mater for my PhD. So I kind of already know the department and I like I have my advisors and like know some of the people and stuff. But it is really interesting. Like it feels like a totally different side, honestly, compared to like undergrad. Like it feels like on one hand, it feels like everything I'm doing is like a lot more applicable to like my interests and like, what I want to do with my career. But it's so much work. I mean, like the amount of reading is like no joke. And like I think like the pressures are really different because it feels like I'm using this program to build towards my career. So it's like, I have to take everything super seriously and like really think about like, how am I going to use this in the future? But I think so far it's been a pretty good experience. I feel really blessed, to have the people I do in my support system. So
Nice. So wait, how did it work for you? Did you get your undergrad, and was there like a track to just go through with your PhD? Because I know some programs do that. Or did you get your do undergrad, go somewhere else for a master's, and then come back to where you got your undergrad degree to get your PhD? Or was it just full like a full, you know what I'm asking?
yeah.
So hard for me today. I'm so sorry.
No, it's no worries. So for me, so for my undergrad, I spent the first 2 years at a community college.
Cool.
And then I transferred to a 4 year to finish out my BA. And then in my senior year, I was applying to PhD programs. And there are like a few people in my department who like were also community college transfers and then also ended up staying to do the PhD. So my advisor was like, you have a pretty good, shot at doing that. And so I applied to the same department and then just like kind of continued on from there.
Okay, cool, cool. I like that idea of just, I mean, not uh, of kind of staying at one institution and growing those relationships as best as possible. I also started off at a community college in Los Angeles.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think it's like, honestly, for me, it was like the smartest thing to do and the cheapest thing to do. And
Hmm.
if you're with it, you're not gonna learn anything different than what someone who went straight to a 4 year would. So I always tell people that when they ask me, how'd you get into your PhD program, what do you have to do, I'm just like, we went to 2 years. I did 2 years at a community college, and that's okay. That's beautiful. Nice. What's your okay, so age, we talked about oh yeah, how old are you, Apollo?
I am 23.
Hey, okay, cool. Okay, that's nice. That's nice. And what are your pronouns, my dear?
He, him.
Okay. Yeah. If you feel comfortable, tell me about your gender expression and how you sexually identify.
So I identify as a transgender man, and I think in terms of sexual orientation, I'm like bisexual, pansexual, which is like for me, it's like gender doesn't really matter. I'm like attracted to who I'm attracted to.
Mhm. Nice. Is it okay if we go more into your transness and discuss that?
Yeah,
Oh,
for sure.
so how long have you been I feel like that's a weird question. I'm so sorry, Apollo. I'm all over the place today. Usually I'm like on it and like words and they flow and ideas, but today I'm just like, okay, but I'm gonna honor this and keep going. Tell me about your transness and your journey and your experience through that.
Yeah, so I think so for me it's kind of like I think ever since I was like really small, like I would get called kind of like a tomboy a lot, right? And like, I think it's interesting when you're a kid, it's like, like you have an awareness that there is, gender and that like, people of different genders get treated differently and there are different expectations, but like I think you don't necessarily attach so much meaning to it. Like for me it was like, people would call me a tomboy and I'd be like, okay, like, it's like I like what I like and I'm, doing what I want to do. But yeah, I think, and then I think you kind of like as I got older, it's kind of like it's I felt like this really weird kind of tension between like, people reading me as a woman and then like that coming with certain, gender norms and expectations, and then feeling like I was kind of failing to meet those expectations by virtue of like being who I was. And I think, in high school, I really felt that a lot. I think especially in terms of like, feeling very like physically unattractive and feeling like, like men weren't really interested in me because I wasn't, performing femininity in a way that they expected me to. And so I think that really took a toll on like my, self-esteem and self-worth and things like that. And it was like I didn't even know that like you could like be trans, until like, maybe like sophomore year in high school when I started going on like Tumblr and stuff. And like I started getting more exposure to like trans people and like queer people in general. And I was like, oh, there are like other ways of being other than like these two really, strict categories. And so I think I kind of started experimenting a little bit with like different pronouns and stuff, mostly just among like close friends. And then, once I got to college, I ended up dating someone trans and they introduced me to a lot more trans people. And then that was when I got, more exposure to like, there's like gender affirming surgeries and like you can do hormone replacement therapy and stuff. And I was like, whoa, this is like, something that really interests me, but is this really something that like I can do? Exactly. Like it's so like you're like, it's because they're such like big procedures, but it's like, and you're like, is this really something that like, I can seriously like pursue? And I think, it just kind of ended up getting to a point where I was just really feeling like, like the way I was expressing myself wasn't true to who I was. And like I was really trying to kind of fit into the mold, so to speak, and kind of trying to, perform femininity to make so that other people wouldn't feel uncomfortable and so that I wouldn't feel like I was being ostracized for kind of being who I was. But I think, I ended up reaching a breaking point where I was just like, this is just making me so miserable. And it's like, yeah, I could continue being in the mold and like, meeting people's expectations, but like what is that really doing to me and like my feelings of self-worth and happiness? So I was just kind of like, fuck it, like I'm coming out as a trans man, like I'm transitioning, I'm getting, gender affirming surgeries and stuff, and like whoever's here to support me is who I want to be around, and like everybody else, you know fuck it, fuck them, so
That's so exciting. How long has it been since you've declared like this is who I am, this is who I'm gonna be, fuck everybody else? Like how many years has it been or months? I don't know.
it's been almost a year now. It'll be a year in March.
Wow, wow. Um, if you feel comfortable, please tell me if it what's too what's too much and what's not. Um, how does it feel to have gender affirming processes? Like what was that process like for you? Um, and that question comes from there's like a sect of people who say, you know what, my transness doesn't how I look or how I look or present to the world doesn't affirm my transness. I affirm my transness. And then there's folks that are like, yes, I'm gonna go and do whatever process that makes me feel most like in my body. So I want to know what that was like for you.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me, a lot of it was just like, really feeling uncomfortable in my own body, and almost feeling like the way I would describe it is almost like I was kind of like cringing. I was like inside myself and like cringing away from my body. Like I felt so disconnected from like how I physically looked, and like that there was such a disconnect between like my physical representation and like who I felt I was on the inside. And so for me, it was like, and I was also on the fence a lot about, gender affirming surgeries and especially hormone replacement therapy. But I think after seeing other trans men who went through those processes, and just like talking to them and stuff, it was like I could really identify with what they were feeling and felt like that was the right path for me. And I think it's been really interesting trying to like get those things done during COVID, because I started last March which
Yeah.
was when the first shelter in place happened. So really unfortunate timing of the two events there, but yeah, so basically like elective surgeries aren't really happening right now. Like there was a period where they were, and then they kind of like stopped. So it's been a little on and off. So it's been really frustrating, I think, trying to seek out those processes, because I mean, they already take like so long, like it took me like 3 months just to be able to like talk to a surgeon. And that was just for the initial consultation. And then my original surgeon ended up randomly retiring. And then so I had to go through the process again with a different surgeon. And then I found out that I got like bumped to the bottom of like the priority list because I had to switch surgeons. Um, so I think in terms of the surgery side, it's been kind of like, unpredictable, and like, I think, these hospitals are like not good at communicating at all, like what's going on. But I think thankfully for, HRT, I've been able to start it, and like I've been able to do like my blood work and stuff. So I'm thankful that at least something is kind of going.
Yeah. I just read this book called Testo Junkie. I don't know if you are familiar with it. It's by Paulo Cecchiato, something like that. But it was an interesting book because he talks about um, like this process of taking HRT, um, like as a renegade, like without the precautions or without the rules or guidelines or regulations of a medical institution. And it's like a Foucauldian breakaway of systems and how the body exists, as like this renegade. So it's interesting that how your experience is like, I went through this process with this institution, with this medical institution, to begin affirming the me, right? That is trying to break away from, you know, your body not feeling, I don't know if safe is the word, like yourself in your body. So it's interesting. I don't know. It's reminding me of it's reminding me of that. Um, what's your relationship to your masculinity now?
I think it's really evolving, and like I really am kind of open to it changing kind of over time. Especially because I think I'm kind of in a weird place right now where it's like, like I've done a lot of reading, of works written by trans men, and a lot of them talk about, like kind of stepping into this kind of privilege, right? This kind of male privilege, and kind of like how they navigate that, and have to confront it. And for me, it's like, so it's like maintaining that awareness of this male privilege, but also being in this weird space where it's like a lot of people don't ID me as a cis male, right? So it's like, what privileges am I being afforded in this kind of space? But honestly, I feel like, I'm really in this process of just kind of accepting that, like, you know, everything I do is like part of my masculine identity, right? It's like, like I love wearing like cropped tops and stuff. And like I also love going to the gym and like lifting weights and stuff. And that's like, it's so exciting because it's like this is all manifestations of like how I perform my masculinity. And like honestly, I'm just so excited to see how that like changes over time.
I'm excited for you. Exciting. Where do you find home?
I think I find a lot of home, honestly, amongst the people I'm closest to and the people that I trust the most. I think with being trans, it's like, I think it has really put me kind of on the defensive a little bit, I think because, I feel like you can really tell when someone is not seeing you for you, you know what I mean? Like you can really tell when someone is kind of just like, maybe they're using he, him pronouns, but then they're not really, respecting your gender identity or whatever. Um, and so I think, for me, it's really been, um, kind of like heartwarming and fulfilling just to be able to find those people who I really feel like, respect me and see me, not just for my transness, but also honestly, things beyond my transness, as that's only, one part of who I am. And kind of just like being in community with them and like leaning on them for support, um, has really been, good, not only for my evolving gender identity, but also for just for me as a person. So I'm really, thankful for that.
What are you searching for?
Yes.
Yes. I love
um,
that.
honestly, a lot of love, honestly. Like I'm a very like hopeless romantic, not only in terms of like, romantic relationships, but also in terms of platonic relationships too. I think, even as like a really introverted person, like I'm always looking for more people to like appreciate and like express love towards. So, and I think that really drives a lot of what I do. Like, like when I decided to stay at my undergrad for my PhD, it was because there were people here that I like really genuinely loved and like really was felt connected towards. And so I was like, why would I go anywhere else if I have that, here for me? And I feel like that really drives a lot of my like personal goals. It's like, where am I going to find the most love and acceptance, and kind of just be a whole person?
I'm gonna jump a question to kind of piggyback off your response. How do you experience love, like on a very tactile, um, day to day experience, moment to moment experience?
I think like I think when people are kind of able to see me be vulnerable, and they're very like open to it and like very affirming of it, like I think so like recently, um so this past quarter, like halfway through the quarter I was like really struggling, like I felt really overwhelmed, and like I wasn't really sure if like the PhD thing was right for me, and I was kind of feeling a lot of like struggles with like my perfectionism and like anxiety and stuff, and I reached a point where I was like, okay, I have to absolutely do something about this. Otherwise, like, I'm gonna drop out of this program. So I like randomly emailed my advisor and I was like, hey, can we talk? Like I'm feeling a little bit stressed. And then we had like a meeting, and I ended up just kind of like, almost like word vomiting to him. Like I was kind of like, oh my God, like this, like I don't feel good. Like this is such a mistake. Like, having such a hard time. And like he was so open to it in a way that like really surprised me, but that was, I think really core to our relationship now, that he was, he really like sat down with me and was like, okay, like, tell me like what your week looks like what's your like weekly schedule, and like, we'll try and figure out like, what are the pockets of time where you can like rest, what hours do you work best in, like, like what do you really have time for, what you might need to, drop. And so, and that he was like, he was like accepting of that moment of vulnerability with him, and that he really wanted to like help me work through that. And so in that moment I felt a lot of love and like support from him. And so I think in like those kinds of moments with like other people, where they're accepting of that, is really how I experience love.
I love that. Talk about love, 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 love. I love that because I often think, and we've heard this uh, around, but I think vulnerability is one of the like the crucial steps to create like a capacity to grow, to share. It's like the one superpower that no one ever talks about, you know. So
Hmm.
I think it's interesting how you experience love is through others creating space for you to be vulnerable, and I think that's so important. We don't get that all the time. Not not I mean, I think we do, but we also don't. It's not talked about enough, vulnerability. Mm. Where do you see yourself, like in television or um magazines, cartoons, anything?
I think for me, I think so much of my personality revolves kind of around, vulnerability like we talked about, but also like this kind of, I don't know, like this like silliness and like kind of connecting with like that inner child in myself. Um, and so I think for me, somewhere where I really see myself is this cartoon called Adventure Time. I don't know if you've
That's my favorite show in the whole
same.
world. Okay, let's go into it. Have you seen every single episode?
I have, yeah.
Let's do it. Let's do it. I'm here. Okay, go ahead. Let's just break it down.
I think Adventure Time is just like this kind of amazing combination of like kind of this like that inner child and kind of exploring that vulnerability and like those different kinds of relationships you can have with people, and then also this like existential dread and kind of like this like all these like philosophical questions that you kind of just like stumble on throughout your life. And I don't know. It's such an amazing cartoon, and I actually remember like when the first episode came out like 10 years ago. And it's almost felt like I've kind of like grown up with Adventure Time, and it's kind of like as the show goes on, it gets more mature and like addresses those more difficult questions, and it's kind of like it's almost like that was like kind of the same you know, like way that like my own mind kind of evolved over time as I grew older. So I really feel like a deep connection to that show, and just like a deep kind of appreciation for it, and feel like I really see a lot of myself and my own insecurities and stuff within that show.
Do you have a favorite character?
Oh my gosh, I'm all over the place. I think when I first started watching the show, Peppermint Butler was my favorite. Um,
Yes. Oh my God, spells.
yeah.
Okay, go for it.
I also really love BMO, of course. BMO is so cute. And I also really honestly, I really like Finn. I feel like now that I'm like older and I've kind of seen how like Finn has grown up, I feel like I really identify with that. And so I also have a really soft spot for Finn. And of course, like Marceline. I'm naming every character now, but like
Oh my goodness. I've always been an LSP, like at my core. I
Yes.
really love Space Princess. And I feel like on a weird level, I'm kind of like Princess Bubblegum. Like I just have so much love that it kind of gets a little like authoritarian sometimes. I don't know what to do with it. I gotta let go. And man, that show, it hits you, you're right, it hits everything. Like myth, magic, science, like funnies, everything that you could possibly think of that makes a good story, that show does it. Do you have a favorite episode? Now that I know someone that has seen the entire series, do you have a favorite episode?
Ooh, there are so many good ones. I really like the one where BMO is like the detective and like that's a really good one. And the ones with Marceline's dad are also really, really funny. And I feel like that's such an interesting dynamic. And a lot of the ones with like Finn where he's like struggling, like I remember like one of my favorite ones is the one where he's like on that like never ending train and he gets like kind of like obsessed with like he's trying to like cope through his like breakup with the Flame Princess, and like Jake is trying to like pull him out, and then at the end of the episode he kind of Finn's just like, just let me like do my thing and then I'll like come back, like I'm just trying to cope with my feelings right now. I feel like that's such a great episode as well.
I love that episode because if you look at the landscape of him going through these different stages, it's like the second part of like a puzzle in the land. So he goes like, I can't remember what the first one is. He breaks up with Flame Princess. then he goes on this, circle train, and then he goes to this cave. I can't remember what it's called. The cave where he basically can't open his eyes. Um,
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
all part of like the same. It's like a game almost where he goes to like different stages within that one landscape. I'm just like, whoa, this show is on different level.
Yeah, the lore building in that show is really, really wild. We just watched, actually just last night, we watched The Distant Lands,
Mm,
the
I've
Marceline
seen
one and the
it.
Bima one.
Yeah. What did you think of that one? I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent with it.
I liked them both. I think the Bima one, I feel like I have to watch it again because I feel like there was a lot going on in that episode and like a lot of like lore and stuff that I didn't pick up on the first time, but I really liked it. And Obsidian was just like had me in my feelings. I was like, oh my god, like there's a lot of sad stuff happening. I mean, we got like some of Marceline's backstory and then like her relationship with Princess Bubblegum, of course. So man, just both great episodes. I'm so excited for the Peppermint Butler one that's coming out.
Is that coming out soon? Do you know when?
I don't know. They've been releasing them pretty slowly, like one a month or something. So hopefully, maybe this month they'll come out with that.
Yeah, Peppermint, man, Peppermint Butler is like, he's a gangster. You're like, whoa. Okay, last thing I'm going to say. I realized another one of my favorite characters is Canyon, which is Billy's girlfriend. So I love the Billy and Canyon dynamic because you never see them together, but you know that there's like this intense, like cosmic love that's between them. It's very powerful. Genius show. Jesus Christ. Okay. I'm gonna move on. Who's the first person that you felt connected to? This could be anyone. It could be an author, a fictional character, besides like cartoons, stuff like that. Just anyone.
Yeah. I really like N.K. Jemisin as an author. She is amazing. I recently read her fifth season trilogy, and like those books are something else. Like I really like sci-fi, and I really like like supernatural type of things. And like her world building is super amazing, and like her characters are so,
I think
you
I'm
know,
familiar with her work. What does she? I know she does sci-fi, but what realms does she take you into?
she kind of does like this like it's almost kind of like a post-apocalyptic like that series specifically is very like post-apocalyptic, and like it's it really centers like Black people in a really interesting way, and like you know it's just kind of like what is the future like with Black people, and then it's like there's like Black people with powers, and like they're just kind of like um you know it's so hard to describe. Like it's so like she has so many different like like themes woven into like that series, and like so much emotion behind her work that is just I highly recommend it. I think it's such a wild ride, and she does it really well.
Nice. I'm gonna have to check that out. All right, we're gonna pivot a little bit. Tell me about the first time you realized you were Black.
I think for me it was pretty apparent, I think, from two different angles. The first was that, I think my dad has done a really good job ever since we were really small, telling us that we were Black and, educating us um, on, like, I remember, like, on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, he, like, made all of us, like, sit down as kids and, like, watch a documentary about, like, Martin Luther King Jr., which, as a kid is not, the thing you want to be doing. But I think, looking back on it, I really appreciate it. And like, his, he was very open about talking about like social issues and like, activism. So I always felt like I kind of had that knowledge, and that became such a core part of my personal values. And then I think on like the other hand, it was like, I grew up in like a very, white, pretty heteronormative, town. And, that was where I, went to public school for. And it was like, I was like one of like a handful of Black kids, at my school. And especially in like my AP classes, it was like usually I was like the only Black kid. And so it was like, I got all of the classic, like the, racist commentary and like microaggressions and stuff like that. And so, it was like a constant awareness that, I was Black.
How did you combat or contend with those comments back then?
I think honestly it was really hard. Like I think I was like really angry a lot of the time, and I felt very ostracized. I think not only for just being Black, but also for like, having this like kind of like social justice angle and like value that I was holding on to, and that I was really determined to be very outspoken about. Even in class, it was like, I didn't care if I was like, that person pulling the race card or whatever. It's like, I had something to say, so I was gonna say it. You know what I mean? And so I think, honestly, I was just like, I was pretty angry, and I was pretty, introverted and like closed off for a lot of high school. And then I think like, once I got to college, I was like, oh, I'm not, like my thoughts are valid, and that there are people out there who, also believe in those things. And it was like, I just grew up, in a very like moderate, white town that like doesn't, value those same things. And so I think like having those kinds of communities, as I grew older was really valuable to me.
Nice, nice. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but can you recall a memory or like a very specific experience of when you felt you were queer, like the first time?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I feel like, because I feel like it's like such a, it almost feels like one long memory, like broken up into like different pieces, and it's like one of those things where it's like you don't really realize it's like queer until you like look back and you're like, that was kind of gay of me, you know what I mean? In that moment. um but honestly, because like I can even think back to like when I was a kid and I was watching like Powerpuff Girls and stuff, and I was like so obsessed, and I was like, oh my god, like, I love, you know what they're about. Like I love like the toughness factor, and then also like the softness factor of that show. And then honestly, and then yeah, again, just like, as I got access to like the internet and stuff, and like, I found spaces where like, I was able to like talk to, people of different genders and stuff, and like, get more knowledge about the queer community in general. It was like, oh, like maybe I'm not straight after all. You know what I mean?
I really, I really appreciate that answer because sometimes folks are able to pinpoint it to like, I was 7 years old and my teacher said, or my brother did, or or like my mom felt. And I like this idea of queerness and transness being like a continuum of feelings versus like a stage that you kind of like or phase that you kind of just go through. So I think that's a very valid and honest answer. Yeah, yeah. What do you want to say to your 12-year-old self?
Oh, my little 12-year-old self. Man, I feel like I feel like that's always such an interesting thing to think about for me, because it's like, on one hand it's what I want to be like, like it gets better, and like, hang in there, and like you'll find yourself. But I also think like what I was feeling at 12, like a lot of that anger and like sadness and like, insecurity was like so valid, especially in like, given the space that I grew up in. It was like, how could you not feel that way? um so I feel like if I was really gonna like tell myself something, it would be to like go to therapy and like, explore those feelings more openly, and to like really, value the friends that you do have and the people that, end up sticking around and that, really appreciate you and like validate those feelings and allow you to be vulnerable. But yeah, I have so much like empathy and like a weird sense of like protection for like my younger self, because like I totally get, where a lot of those feelings, difficult feelings came from. And like I really respect that, my 12-year-old self was kind of able to like to become the person I am today and to kind of like push through all of those things.
Yeah, I think it's powerful, especially validating your anger. Because at that age, especially if you're experiencing things, people try to invalidate it so often. Like, you shouldn't feel this way. You have, and it's just like, nah, like, I'm angry for a reason, and I may not have the words or the capacity to articulate that. So that's powerful. What do you want to hear from your 60-year-old self?
Oh man. I am so excited to be 60. Honestly, like I feel like someone I remember reading this trans man. I'm not gonna be able to like repeat exactly what he said, but he said something like, once he started hormone replacement therapy and he lived more openly as a trans man, it was almost like he like went back in time and kind of became like a child in a sense. And I think he's 30 now, and he's like, now it feels like I've gone like forward in time, and like I feel so old relative to like, in like trans years, and like I feel like so wise, and like I'm so excited to see myself like grow into like a 60-year-old man. And like I really feel the same way. Like it's almost like I feel like I was kind of like born again, and like I'm young, and like I'm kind of like, figuring things out and kind of watching myself grow. And so just to imagine me being like 60 as like a trans man is like so amazing. And like I'm just like excited to see, the way that he expresses his masculinity, and kind of like, the people he's found and kind of trusted in his life. And also to see what he thinks about his PhD program after he has long finished it will be interesting.
Wow, that possibility seems so exciting. Like, wow, because especially for so long, like black trans men have not been able to fulfill that. So to know that as that's possible for yourself, it's like, whoa, it's like a whole nother level. Well, I hope to talk to you when you're 60. I'm still doing this. I hope to talk to you again when you're 60 and be like, hey, tell me about, your life and your adventure. Um, I have two more questions. If you could change your identity or form, which is kind of funny now, I guess, if you could, um, what would you change it to? And I've expanded this question to, you could be a hummingbird, a tree, um, the sky, anything.
Honestly, I'd probably be an otter. Like I've given this a lot of thought. Okay.
Okay.
And I don't know, I just love otters, and I feel like such a connection to otters because they're so like, I don't know, they're just like so like cuddly and like really, but also like really smart and like really fast. And I also feel like being an ocean creature would be really cool. Like I've always had like a fascination with like the
Mhm.
ocean ever since I was like really small. And like if I didn't find sociology, I'd probably be trying to do like marine biology or something, because I feel like the ocean is just like really incredible and mind-blowing. But yeah, I feel like I would be a playful silly little otter.
So cool. I actually never heard that answer, so that's exciting too. Last question, my dear. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you really want to express in this moment?
Ooh. I guess that like I feel like I have such a deep appreciation for, you know, my transness. And I feel like, because I think, I feel like a lot of trans people, and like I experienced this, feeling like having a moment where it's like I kind of, wished that I wasn't trans, or like wished that I had been born you know, a cis male, and like that's an ongoing like internal discussion I have with myself. But I think at the end of the day, it's like I'm so grateful for it because I really feel like there's something so powerful about just being able to like, you know, essentially like rebuild yourself and like, you know, being so open about who you are and like um you know, yeah, and even at the risk of like, you know, potentially losing people you care about, or you know, making people uncomfortable or like challenging those norms. And I think there's so much power in kind of like stepping outside of all of that and just kind of like, you know, being your authentic self. And so I have a deep appreciation for my transness and also the trans community broadly, and that, you know, all of us have share that kind of collective beautiful experience of being trans.
I really love that answer. Um, it resonates with me because I think there's this idea uh, within the constructs of the society, you know, through patriotism, all that, patriarchy, uh, capitalism, all these things, that there are an inherent capacities to like a human being. And I think nothing about us is inherent. It's all conditioning. So for someone to be brave enough and strong enough to even say, no, I'm going to combat this conditioning and I'm going to literally construct and reconstruct and rethink and reimagine my expression, um, that's to live. That's to live, not just talk about it, but to live, you know, against those systems that tell you, you know, this is who you are and this is who you're supposed to be. So I think that's dope. Yeah. I'm gonna I'm gonna stop our interview right here, Paula.
All right, sounds good.